Well, good morning and welcome once again to Elevenses. I'm Kevin Williams of Survival Skills Rider Training. It's show number 126 and it's Wednesday the 31st of March here in London in the UK. It's a reasonably bright morning at the moment with the promise of sun later and the temperature warming up nicely to a pleasant 22 degrees. That's what's promised. Certainly a lovely day yesterday. Not quite so good towards the end of the week, but let's make the most of it while we can, particularly as we're now allowed back out on the road. Right, so what have I got to tell you today? Well, I'll talk a little bit about my training courses and why we're out on the road again. Meanwhile, while we're off the road, biker in I've forgotten where it was now. I'll get to it when I remember what the story was. Biker run off the road by UFO. You can say it with nails if flowers won't do. A scooter rider's unusual solution to his one-up riding problem with his girlfriend. Euro license swap issues for Brits abroad. The World Health Organization is calling for blanket 30 kph limits where people and traffic mix. The National Motorcyclist Council has held its initial meetings with government. Bike Safe is going to be backed by Devitt Insurance. And today's biking tip for slow control, the rear brake is your friend. So settle yourselves down for the next 25-30 minutes or so. If you have a comment, a question, any feedback, anything you want to know on a future show, do feel free to drop me a line or just say hello, which is exactly what Clive has done. Good morning, Clive. Good to see you. Right, okay, so on with the program. Don't forget, first of all, that after 5 months, the longest break I've ever had from not just from training, incidentally, but riding too, that I'm actually out there working again. And not surprisingly, after such a long break, some of the simple stuff that I used to do without thinking has gone a bit rusty, like trying to remember where I put the keys after I got the bike started up a couple of months ago. I did find them eventually. But my last on-road course was actually back at the beginning of November. So I am working my way mentally through my preparations for my first actual on-road course. I've just done my first on-road briefing. And one of the things I discovered, of course, was I tidied up the PC and tidied up the online briefing presentations with it. I found them eventually, but I've absolutely no memory of moving them to a different folder. Anyway, I know many of us will be raring to go. So some of us will have indeed already jumped on the bike and gone, but I'm anticipating that some possibly less experienced riders might just be in need of a bit of a refresher. So I've created a course called exactly that, the Riding Refresher one-day session. The idea of this course is not so much to deliver training, though I'll certainly help with any issues I spot whilst we're out on the ride, but basically take you through some riding environments, some different riding environments, and be there ready with a sort of helping voice, as it were, wherever it's needed. So if you feel that that might help you out, drop me a line. The days are rapidly increasing in length now and hopefully staying pleasantly warm, so time to think about booking some training. I'll just remind you that in order to maximise social distancing, all the briefings are now online, and you'll also get a freshly sanitised radio with a brand new headset to go with it. Feedback on those online briefings has been good, and don't forget I can deliver online training too, either one-to-one coaching or via my presentations to clubs and groups. You'll probably recall I was online to New Zealand with the Science of Being Seen talk over the weekend for the Shiny Side Up virtual event, and Kiwi Bruce Easton emailed me to say, excellent presentation, rich with content and very insightful for the audience. So there's some good feedback on that. Personally, I'm BTEC qualified as a post-test trainer. I've got an adult education distance learning NVQ. I've got a master's in science, which comes in handy when I'm doing things like the Science of Being Seen, and over 3 decades of experience as a professional motorcyclist. So I think I can fairly safely say I'm one of the most experienced trainers in the country. And I will also say that my courses are very deliberately geared towards real life riding, and that I find that riding is a lot more fun when we don't scare ourselves every time we ride. So look at survivalskills.co.uk if you're interested. Okay, on with some news. Around the world, it has clearly been weird news month in March. Zimbabwe, that's where it was. Most people don't encounter UFOs on the way home from work, but that's what apparently happened to Richmond Miambosa. He says that 2 weeks ago, the sudden appearance of an unidentified flying object caused him to fall off his motorcycle and landing him with a trip to hospital for a leg injury. He says, I was travelling home on my motorbike at around 9 a.m. when I witnessed a strange light travelling in the sky. I tried to concentrate on riding, but what made me fall was the sound that followed after the light. I fell off the bike due to panic. I thought I was dying. He also claims to have seen the UFO itself. The object looked like a rocket with fire on its back. I was 100% sober, but I was so confused because I thought I had encountered those strange things people see in the dark and thick forests. Other residents in the area say they also witnessed a bright light followed by a loud booming sound. The local meteorological services department have confirmed unusual activity in the area, but they've not released any further information. So what that unusual activity might be, I have absolutely no idea. Over in Indonesia, however, a man was faced with a slightly different problem. How do you persuade your girlfriend, your skeptical girlfriend, that you're not taking other girls out on the pillion of your scooter? So that was the problem that Khairul Anam was faced with. So he decided not to say it with flowers, but with nails, and that basically was his solution. Yes, you are seeing that right. He hammered nail into the bottom of his seat, and he took us through the entire process of that on Facebook. Essentially, take seat, take hammer, take nail, hit nail through seat with hammer, and repeat quite a lot of times. And then he used his social media page to show off his handiwork. Almost predictably, his photos have gone viral. If there is a downside to this, it may have done wonders for his social media standing, but it doesn't seem to have impressed the girlfriend too much, judging by the expression on her face there. She's not too depressed with his cunning plan post his pillion deterrent option. So, okay, rather more seriously though, the consequences of leaving the EU and the failure of the UK government to have reciprocal agreements in place with EU countries means that UK citizens resident in several European countries risk losing their access to the roads. Here's the problem. It's the EU licence harmonisation legislation. Now, that came into force in January 2013. Not only were test standards put in place right across the block, but you may recall that it was also the date at which the tiered motorcycle licence scheme called Progressive Access was introduced. And at the same time, all driving licence issued in the EU were given the same look and feel. Basically, we got the photo card licence printed on the piece of plastic, which was the size and shape of a credit card, with the all the details of what you were entitled to drive on it and which country it was issued. And the idea was that that license, being standardized, would be recognized right across the EU. So with that legislation operating across the bloc, the previous arrangements whereby individual countries had recognized each other's driving test standards and their licensing arrangements, that agreement lapsed. Now, thanks to Brexit and Britain leaving the EU, we're no longer part of the licence harmonisation scheme. And that's causing problems for UK citizens who've recently moved abroad, but not yet actually had time to swap their licences to their new country of residence. For example, the French government announced late last year that as a consequence of Brexit, British residents in France would need to exchange a UK licence for a French one, and they would have to do it by the 31st of December 2021. But right now, those who've been putting their licence applications in have had them rejected on the grounds that there is no reciprocal licence agreement invalid. So in other words, drivers still have their UK license, but when the time period that you have to be resident and use foreign country's license expires, then there is no ability to drive. You can't drive as a resident. Now, fines for driving in France without a license are pretty hefty, up to €15,000. And right now, the only route to getting a French license is to take the French driving test, which includes a French language theory test. And you basically face similar training and testing costs to the UK. So it could cost, typically perhaps up to some €10,000 or something. So the problem's not only affecting France. British residents in Spain have until 30th of June to start exchanging licenses. In Italy, if holders did not apply to exchange by the 31st December last year, they have to take the Italian driving test. So there are real problems out there in Europe at the moment, and government sources on the UK side have suggested that the problem is bureaucratic overload on the European side, and that an agreement is close to being sealed with the individual countries in the EU, but right at the moment there is no solution. So don't worry, if you're a short-term visitor or a tourist, then you can continue to use a UK license, but the problem arises if you are out there long-term. Meanwhile, over with the World Health Organization, it happens to be the 6th UN Global Road Safety Week coming up in May, and it's going to be promoting a 30 kph 20 mile per hour speed limit as the norm in places where people mix with traffic. WHO says that 30 kph limits create safe, healthy, green and livable cities. And ahead of the event, they're calling on people to sign an open letter and add their voice to what they describe as a growing global movement demanding these low-speed streets. The letter reads, low-speed streets save lives and are the heart of any community. 30 kph speed limits where people and traffic mix make for streets that are healthy, green and livable. In other words, streets for life. We're calling on policymakers to act for low-speed streets worldwide, limiting speeds to 30 kph where people walk, live and play. And they call this the Love 30 campaign. So, okay, they've released a campaign toolkit, which includes social media templates, infographics, a poster campaign and a fact sheet. Am I in favour of a 30 limit or 30 kph limit blanketing our towns and cities? Well, yes, in some ways it depends on the road. If it's a major thoroughfare where traffic flows freely, maybe not, but certainly for residential streets I really don't have a problem with 20 limits down sort of roads where people are living. But sometimes they do get put in place, I think, on inappropriate roads. And one of the major problems, of course, is they're now enforcing them with speed humps, which knocks the suspension to bits. I've just had to replace the rear suspension on my camper. And as it's a Japanese import, I can tell you it wasn't cheap sourcing those shocks from abroad. What's going on in the comments here? Clive has said an interesting piece in MCN page 4. Have I seen it? No, I haven't. I'm afraid I long since stopped reading MCN. Nick has also said Guten Morgen from Germany. Hello there, Nick. Hi, how are you doing? So, okay. You may remember that the newly minted National Motorcyclists Council has been formed by as an umbrella group for a bunch of organisations supposedly representing us. Nobody asked me, but hey ho, what do I know? But they've now held their initial meetings with governments to develop a motorcycling policy and an official government motorcycling strategy. And they say they have strong interest from key officials. So they've been asked to present their immediate priorities and have also been invited to join policy discussion groups within government. The NMC believe a national motorcycling strategy should cover the following areas, including motorcycling within government transport policy. Well, I certainly wouldn't disagree with that. We've seen just last year a case where Oxford Council, the county council, produced a plan which basically rejected motorcycling as a valid transport option. They want to see improvements to training and safety, and I don't disagree with that. Access to bus lanes and other priority measures. Yeah, okay, bus lanes, fair enough. Priority measures, what's that supposed to mean? That's one way to upset other people, give motorcycles priority. Full consideration of motorcycling as an environmental challenge and as opportunities evolve. Again, what do you mean by that? If you're saying that motorcycling is more economically sound than driving a petrol-engined car, it depends. If you are riding a motorcycle that does 35 to the gallon and wears its tyres out in 1,000 miles, you are certainly not more environmentally sound than someone driving a car that is nudging 60 mpg and lasting 20, 30,000 miles on a set of tyres. Much of the dust that is floating around in the air is now being blamed on rubber and brake materials, by the way. Full consideration of motorcycling. No, I've just done that one. Incentivization of motorcycling, both for people to ride and also for safety. What does that mean? That's all a bit woolly, isn't it? Accessibility to a full road network designed to keep motorcyclists safe. Again, what exactly does that mean? Don't we have access to the full road network? I can think of one road where we're not motorcycles are not allowed, not too far away from here, near the Ace Cafe. But otherwise, yes, I think we have access to the road network. Designing that road network so that it's not dangerous to motorcyclists is an issue. Certainly, putting speed bumps in on blind corners is a really bad idea, as is paint round all speed limits on blind bends as well, which is another thing I've bitched about in the past. An effective response to motorcycle theft and crime. Again, I can see there's two sides to that story, aren't there? There's the crime response, but surely the emphasis should be on the motorcycle manufacturers making theft-proof motorcycles in the first place. A positive policy for the use of rural green roads and motorcycle use in rural communities. This again is the shutdown of rights of way on unmade roads and how that affects recreational use of motorcycling. Changes of government I'm really having a lot of problem with my tongue this morning. I do apologise. Government regulation as it relates to motorcycle sport, plus realising the social and economic potential of the sport. I don't know. Speedway was once upon a time the second biggest spectator sport in the country. But are you really going to drag non-motorcycle fans in to watch motorcycle racing? I don't really know. Okay, and the final one, there's consideration of motorcyclist needs in areas of statutory regulation of traffic on both sealed and green roads. So NMC Executive Director Craig Carey-Clinch said, "This early progress is extremely welcome. We have been delighted with the willingness by the government to engage so soon after the NMC's launch. The range of expertise across the motorcycle organisations that have been brought together by the NMC seems to have been a clear factor in this positive approach from the government, providing as it does a reference point for the common views of motorcycle riding representative groups on a range of consensus policy areas. Creating a fresh strategy for a whole transport mode is, on the face of it, a daunting task given the wide range of urgent issues that face wider UK public policy at the moment. But these early steps reveal a willingness by the government to further explore policy issues facing motorcycling, several of which have been previously highlighted, blah, 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 blah." To which I say, haven't we heard all this before? Haven't we been here many, many, many times? I hope the NMC actually does something positive for motorcycling, but I tend to feel that it's the same people saying the same things over and again. Right, okay, so Robert has just made a comment about arterial roads suffering the greatest number of accidents involving 20s. I don't I would have to check the facts on that, but I suspect it's related to traffic density one way or another. I shouldn't suspect that they are more dangerous. Devits, the insurance specialists, are backing the Bike Safe scheme run by the police. As you'll know, Bike Safe workshops are offered right across the country. No less than 33 forces currently offering Bike Safe, which is pretty good. And basically the course aims to up the skill level and road awareness of bikers right across the UK. Once again, there are quotes from the various people involved. Head of marketing for Devit, Tom Warsop, said, Devit's long been an advocate of post-test training and encouraging most cyclists to improve their skills. The new partnership underpins that belief. Nothing but benefit to be found in completing a bike safe course, and we hope that existing policyholders and potential new customers take advantage of that. And to try to encourage people, they will be giving a 10% discount to bike safe courses, and customers who've got a bike safe course in their pocket will get 10% off their new insurance policies purchased directly through Devit, so presumably not through a price comparison site. Right, okay, so on to the final topic for the day, which is basically going to be a little bit about slow riding, as it's something that I do tend to notice when I'm out and about on the bike, that I see a lot of riders who do struggle somewhat with their slow riding control. So here's some reminders for you on what to do. So something you can actually take out and do yourself over the next few days while you're out and about on the bike. Now, the first thing I'll say is that the biggest weakness I see in the current Module 1 test is that the off-road maneuvers are almost completely irrelevant to real life, in as much as people don't make the connection between what they do in a sterile training environment and what they do on the road. The U-turn on test, for example, is a rarely needed maneuver on the road, and it's even less likely that we'll need to perform a figure of 8 out on the road or a slalom through cones. So the problem is, whilst riders actually come out of basic training with reasonable slow riding skills, what they fail to see is how what they've just learned is connected to what they're going to need on the road. And so they don't work on the techniques, because the maneuvers that they use to learn those techniques are basically non-starters on the road. So where do we need slow control? Well, the obvious answer is tight junctions, mini roundabouts in particular, but any tight corner, hairpin bend. If you're up in the mountains on holiday, if you can't get around a slow, tight corner on the flat, you will certainly struggle coming down a mountain. And it's likely, of course, that with the 5-month layoff, riders will have slipped backwards. So here's the survival skills quickfire guide to doing slow turns. Now, before anything else, what I would say is make sure that you have your levers in the right place. Now, if you check your handlebars, you will either see a little wheel on top of the lever, the span adjuster, or you may see the adjuster for the cable itself. If you can use the span adjuster just to give yourself a little bit more free play on the end of the lever. One of the things I always find is mechanics have big hands. I don't know why, and they always set the lever up right to the very end of its travel, which works for them, and I can't reach it. Basically, I find that my tips of my fingers are hanging over the lever, and what you actually need is that first knuckle from the hand itself over the lever. That gives you a decent amount of pull. If you're trying to pull it with the fingertips, you are going to wear out your muscles very quickly, but you've also got no control over the lever. Now, very occasionally, you'll find that there is no adjuster at all up on the handlebar, but if you look down at the other end of the cable, down there, you will often find an adjuster there. Both my Hondas have an adjustment at that point, and that photo is actually taken from Yamaha. There, as you can see, there's no adjuster there, but where it is actually just up the cable hidden behind the fairing. So, right, what else do we need? Well, we need a good riding posture. Now, for slow riding, sit forward, sit up close to the petrol tank. That gets your body more upright, more weight off the arms, as we'll see in a moment. But it also allows you to grip the tank with your knees, and that way you can keep the upper half of the body loose, particularly everything down from the shoulders. Shoulder, elbow, and wrist all need to be floppy. If you are leaning hard on the handlebars, all those joints go stiff, and that destroys your slow control. So gripping the tank with the knees and then keeping the top half of the body loose is called the brace position. That's what I call it. And the other thing you need to be able to do is turn your head smoothly. So again, you need to be able to turn your head without dragging your shoulders with them, or you will simply drag the steering with you. Now, second tip, as soon as the bike is moving, get your feet up on the pegs. Once the bike is moving at a brisk walking pace, it's basically balanced for itself. But if you keep your feet dangling, as a lot of riders do, particularly scooter riders, but I've seen big bike riders doing it as well, even a policeman, believe it or not, the other day. Get your feet up onto the foot pegs, and then you've got your knees against the tank, and you can use that brace position, because if your feet are dangling, you're hanging onto the bars for dear life, and then every little wobble of your body gets fed back into the steering. The bike wobbles and weaves, and that's why you think you need to have your feet down as stabilizers in the first place. For exactly the same reason, when slowing, avoid dropping your feet too early. You're not using them as like an aircraft landing gear. They come down just as the bike rolls to a halt. And ideally, you stop with your right foot up on the rear brake so that you drop your left foot down to take the weight of the bike as it comes to a halt. Something else to do, don't stare under the front wheel. It's very easy to end up doing that, but it's far too late. If you do see a pothole under the front wheel, it's too late to avoid it. So it's important to keep eyes up and looking ahead far enough to be able to move the bike around obstacles like wet manhole covers, potholes, or piles of wet leaves, something I fell off on many years ago. So eyes up, and then you've got time to steer to avoid. Now, slow clutch control. As we go slower, then the reason that we start to slip the clutch is to break the direct connection between the engine and the back wheel. Now, this is important even on small bikes, but on a big bike, it becomes vital, because with a lot of power at the back, going through the back wheel from the engine, slightest tweak of the throttle will send the bike shooting forward. And then as soon as you tweak the throttle one way, and the bike shoots out of control forward, you're going to shut the throttle the other way, and that's when bikes stop dead and fall over. So what we do is we use the clutch on the other side to break that direct connection to the back wheel, and then whatever happens with the throttle doesn't transmit itself to the rear wheel. That is why we use the clutch to break the power from engine to bike. So before moving off, have a good look along the path you're about to take. This is the other bit of planning ahead. Riders often forget to do this. They will be so focused on using the clutch and the throttle and the rear brake altogether that they'll actually forget to look where they're going to go next, and then they turn themselves into problems. So riders, in my experience, worried about their slow control, often forget this vital step. So just do that before you go anywhere. Now, as I said, once rolling, keep the speed up. All machines balance dynamically. That is, it's the forward motion of the bike which actually maintains its balance. Unless you're a trials rider, of course, in which case you can stand still if you want to. But motorcycles on the road are heavier than that. We're not so skilled. So there is this paradox where slow control actually becomes a little bit easier the faster we go. Ride too slowly and balance becomes more difficult. The bike starts to wobble and weave. Then we can't steer the machine accurately, and we actually end up needing more space to make a maneuver than if we had approached it a little bit more quickly and rather better balanced. So the trick to turning in confined areas is not to go slower and slower and slower, but actually to come down to a speed where we still have balance and control over the bike, but then to trust the tyres and lean the bike over. Remember, the further you lean, the tighter the bike turns. So we'll actually turn better in a confined space by adding lean angle whilst we're traveling at a reasonable speed. So the minimum really is going to be a brisk walking pace, and ideally a bit faster than that. A sort of a jogging pace is about as low as I like to go when I'm doing slow control. So how do we control the speed? I've already mentioned that we don't want the throttle doing it all. We can pull the clutch in and that'll break the direct connection. But what if we need to go a little bit faster? Maybe we're turning uphill, or more we want to control the speed and stop it accelerating. Maybe we're turning downhill. Well, then the answer is the rear brake. We've got that foot up on the peg. It's not doing anything. So simply depress the lever and start dragging the rear. It's a lot easier if you drag the rear into a slow turn, because then you know exactly how much you can press it to get it to act. If you've got your toes off the brake, you then have to bring them over onto the lever and then take the slack out of the system and then work the brake. And the danger is that you'll jab it and stop the bike dead, and that's when the bike topples over. So drag it always and just use it slowly and subtly to moderate speed, down to slow down, up to speed up, but leave the throttle and the clutch on the other side reasonably set. Any other times that the slow speed and the rear brake comes in handy? Well, when you want to stop, simple as that. If you turn the bike upright to make sure it's balanced when you come to a standstill, the example here would be turning left. You very often find that the curve goes around the corner up to the give way line, and it's very easy to approach those whilst the bike is leaning over and then try to stop. And of course, with the bike leaning, it'll just topple sideways and then you have to stab a foot down. So try to turn the corner, get the bike upright at the last, and then you can just glide the bike to a stop on the rear brake. And you'll find that with rear brake only, there's no compression on the front forks, there's no sudden rebound at the front end, the bike will stop nice and level. If you try to stop on the front brake, here's my handy little motorcycle, if you try to stop on the front brake, even gently, there'll be some compression of the front forks. And as soon as you release the front brake lever, what will happen is the front bike end of the bike will rebound, and that again is where a lot of riders destabilize the bike and lose their footing, particularly shorter riders on taller bikes. So aim to glide to a halt with the rear brake, and then it's the left foot down. Once you're stopped, then you can do what you like with your feet. I quite often put both feet down. I don't actually need to hold the bike on the rear brake on the flat. It's not a bad idea on a windy day or carrying a fidgety passenger who often wants to adjust their position when you're at a standstill. Amazing how often passengers do that. So then I've got both feet down. But once I'm ready to move off again into a slow turn, maybe I'm turning right and there's a car parked awkwardly on the other side of the road, then foot up on the rear brake before I pull away, ease that rear brake down to it's just biting, and then it's throttle on and clutch gently out till the bike is pulling. Any exceptions to that? Well, just be careful if you are parking or stopping at the left. Of course, in our part of the world, the curb slopes away, or the camber does, towards the curb. There have been incidents on training courses. I remember having to catch a bike by the rear grab rail after the trainee failed to notice there was about a meter deep pothole under her foot when she stopped at the end of a road. I'd seen what she was about to do and was there ready to reach out and grab her grab rail as she started to topple sideways. So do watch where you're putting your foot. A long time ago, I fell off on wet leaves doing exactly that, putting my foot into wet leaves, and then they slipped down the camber, of course. Okay, a couple of exercises that you can try just to run off quickly. Start with your foot on the rear brake, as I said. Take a visual check where you want to go. Lift the revs a bit and ease the clutch out. And you should remember from basic training, we're looking for the biting point where the clutch is neither fully in nor fully out. So once you've found that biting point, try to keep the clutch lever in the same place. Now, ease off the rear brake, but keep your foot on the pedal because that's your speed control. Don't try to juggle the throttle and clutch. Just set them in one place and use the rear brake to control your speed. So drag it, as I said. You should be able to do this and maintain a steady speed. And here's the trick that'll prove whether or not you're slipping the clutch correctly. If you blip the throttle, the machine shouldn't accelerate. If it lurches forward, you haven't got the clutch in quite far enough. If the machine constantly slows down and you're having to let the clutch out a bit, you've got the clutch in a bit too far. And then just basically ride a few meters and stop. Roll the throttle shut and stop the bike on the rear brake and clutch in as you put your foot down to prevent a stall, and then repeat until you can do that nice and smoothly. And here's a variation which is really useful in slow moving traffic. Use the rear brake to slow and speed up, but this time don't stop completely. Get the bike up to a sort of brisk trot, and then slow down to that sort of brisk walking pace and go backwards and forwards between the two using just the rear brake. And then you can try exercise number 3, which is go one step further, which is to actually release the clutch altogether, accelerate away, maybe even throw in a gear change or two, then go back into the slow control with the slipping clutch, remembering to use both brakes to slow down, but easing off the front when you've got the speed right and just holding it on the rear. That needs quite a lot of space, so you need a big empty car park for that one, or a nice quiet road somewhere, but it's a really good exercise to smooth out your clutch control, and even experienced riders can sometimes benefit from those 3 little exercises. So okay, so that's pretty much the end of today's show. Nigel is just looking in and catching the end, so I'm sure you'll go back and watch the beginning. Nigel, good morning to you. Anything else to say? Don't forget, if you are back on the road, and I dare say you are, there are the 60-second safety Better Viking videos over on my YouTube channel. They're only 60 seconds long, so they won't take too much out of your life while you watch them. I'll try and get a new one up tomorrow on Facebook. But if you've missed any, they're over on my Survival Skills UK YouTube channel, and as are all the episodes of Elevenses if you missed them. Don't forget, Tips on Tuesday and Skills on Saturday Facebook posts are now being dual posted to my coffee page and indexed over there. And if you become a supporter for the cost of a coffee, you open up access to over 300 other articles from the Facebook archive. Last but not least, the link in the header for this show gives you the sign up for my new email newsletter. If you do sign up for it this week, I will send you the link to a free download of Back to Biking tips and tricks. So that is it for one more Wednesday. Stay safe back out there. I'll be with the Elevenses again on Sunday. So stay safe, ride safe, and I hope to see you in a few days' time. Bye for now.